within 45 minutes, credit had been claimed by a group called the Resistance Front, which is a well-known proxy for the Lashkar-e-Taiba, based in Pakistan, in a place called Muridke, and the Resistance Front not only made that claim, but went on to reiterate that claim 24 hours later on their official website. So there is no doubt the Resistance Front is a group we had been complaining about to the UN Terrorism Committee in 2023 and 2024, so it's not exactly an unknown entity. So that was another major reason. And then, of course, our intelligence people are no fools. They collated the CCTV footage and identified at least 3 of the perpetrators. 2 of them, by photographs, they were able to identify the names of them because they've been involved in previous terror attacks, were indeed Pakistanis. One was a Kashmiri who had been known to have exfiltrated the language the police like to use into Pakistan for training, and who had clearly been sent back to do this dirty deed. So I want to assure you, number one, that India is a responsible state that wouldn't have done this without being 100% certain that it knew what it was responding to. But equally that it did so in a very measured way and only targeting terror sites. The second argument that the Pakistani delegations have been using is, we're also victims of terrorism, and poor beloved says, I lost my mother to terrorism as well. And I feel deeply sorry for the young man. He should not have had to lose his mother to terrorism. But we didn't create that problem. That problem was created in and by some of the very elements on whose behalf he's speaking now. The Pakistani ISI that created these terror groups to serve the purposes of their policy towards Afghanistan and towards India. They are the ones who have based, trained, armed, financed, equipped, and deployed these terrorists for 37 years. So it's a bit much, I'm afraid. It's very sad, but at the same time, it's as Hillary Clinton rather memorably said a dozen years ago when she was Secretary of State to the Pakistanis, you cannot breed a nest of vipers in your backyard and expect them only to bite your neighbors. So unfortunately, the old story of Dr. Frankenstein, build a monster that escapes your control, one faction of these radicalized Islamist fanatics decided Pakistan itself wasn't Islamist enough for their taste and turned against the ruling establishment there, and that's why some of these killings in Pakistan have been happening. So we sympathize, but we obviously would ask you to look at where the problem originated. So I'll stop there just to give you broadly the contours of these 2 issues. I'm very happy to take questions, comments, pushback, reactions, issue clarifications, whatever you like about it. Chris.
Thank you so much. Please. What we'll do, if we may, is hear from the audience. We've only got 50 minutes or so together before the next engagement that Dr. Tharoor has. So if I can encourage people to keep questions, keep it to questions rather than statements, and keep them as short as possible. Before that, I do want to just say a huge thank you to the 1928 Institute, which has curated this event, one of many events of real top quality that they do. They are the descendants of the Indian League, which your father...
No, my father wasn't old enough for that. It was founded by a man called B.K. Krishnamenon.
Yes.
And my father subsequently helped Krishnamenon to found something called the India Club, which sadly died last year, which was on the Strand, where, you know, impecunious Indians, especially Indian journalists, were able to get a cheap Indian meal and beer in the Strand from 1949 and thereabouts till last year.
And
they've been taken up for redevelopment now.
We know, we were there on the last night. So there you go. So a huge thank you to 1928. I'm I'm an advisor, but I really haven't seen anything like it in Britain. So long may this continue. Right, so questions. Please tell us who you are and what you do. Gentleman there put his hand up first, so please.
Good evening, Dr. Sindoor. My name is Vinod. I'm a Kashmiri pundit, and I also run the APPG for British News.
You also run the?
APPG for British News from a secretariat point of view.
Wonderful.
Right, so this topic about Pahalgam is very close to me.
Right.
Having been born in Kashmir and having seen the whole 80s and the 90s. My question to you is, has General Munir dealt a blow to the promise that India and Modi made post revocation of Article 317, and is now basically going to take Kashmir back 20-30 years? And the lead question is, what does it mean for the rehabilitation of pundits?
So,
What does it mean for the rehabilitation of pundits?
You know, the rehabilitation of pundits.
yeah.
So can we have a couple more, and then you can handle them as a group?
Dr. Sindoor, very eloquent as usual. My name is Aljazeera. My question to you really is, why doesn't India adopt the first strike policy like Israelis do? If you know where they are, know what the intention is, why wait?
So I know that Lord Speaker wants to ask a question. Could you hold on for a sec? I'll ask for you. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So nice to see you again. Rasham Katacha, Director of the Conservative Friends of India. Do you see peace with Pakistan in our lifetime? And how does the influence of China complicate or influence that peace and the likelihood of that happening?
Okay, so I'll take them in that order if I may. Kashmiri pundits, I not just sympathize, I empathize. I was married to a Kashmiri pundit. My late wife, her own family was displaced in 89 to 91 when there were these threats against Kashmiri families by the terrorists, and the government and the police were unable to extend protection to every family in these villages. And I have visited her ancestral home and seen the ruins. It really is a very sad situation in Kashmir, going back precisely to the time that I mentioned when the Mujahideen, freed from the Soviets, having departed from Afghanistan, turned their attention to India. So there is a genuine problem because a large number of Kashmiri pundits were scattered in places in the state but outside the Kashmir Valley, which was their ancestral lands. A large number are settled in Jammu now, and some remain in essentially refugee camps, or camps for internally displaced persons. There are many who've simply gone off and made their lives in other parts of India or abroad, as you have done, and who ultimately no longer nurture a hope of going back. But we have insisted on the principle that those who want to go back should have the right to go back. And indeed, I might add that many Kashmiri Muslims are of the view that their state is impoverished without this large presence of Kashmiri Pandits. I accompanied my late father-in-law to the Hazratbal Mosque to visit as a tourist, and many came up to him and said, "We want you back. The place is not the same without you." There is a certain sense within Kashmir, across religious divides, that people need to be together again. I think that's certainly the view of the people in power today, but there's understandably a lot of hesitation on the part of Kashmiri Pandits to risk going back, as long as every time there seems to be a lull and normalcy, something like this happens, as Pahalgam did, and then they hesitate. So the principle remains, they have a right to return to their homelands, and very often, in fact, their own homes, which have now been demolished, but the land is there and they can rebuild it if it's safe enough to do so. But many of them don't feel it. There are some Kashmiri Pandits who remain. Now, I don't know if you know Professor Amitabh Mattu, for example. His mother, who was a teacher, chose to stay on there. So people like that who have never left the valley, never left Sri Lanka, but they are a very minuscule minority, sorry to say. But the answer remains, there can be no grand plan for them until they feel safe enough to participate in a plan of resettlement and return. The second question was on Israel.
Yeah.
And the answer very simply is that India, as I said, doesn't want to be seen as instigating a conflict. I mean, we really are the land of Mahatma Gandhi. It was striking that every delegation that went abroad, in every country in the world, there is somewhere or the other a bust or a statue of Mahatma Gandhi. And we made it a point to pay floral tribute to the great man, because, we want the world to understand we didn't start this problem, and we have no intention of starting a conflict. It's a pity that the Pakistanis will not be well enough known. And if they do something, we're not going to turn the other cheek. I remember making a speech saying that, Mahatma Gandhi did, after all, use nonviolence to overcome colonial oppression. So he would not have wanted us to live in fear or live in subjugation or live in terror. And he would have wanted us to stand up against that. But ultimately our instinct is one of peace. I think it's extremely unlikely that even the present Indian government, which prides itself on being a tough government, I don't think even they will initiate the first strike action against Pakistan. But by doing what they did at the beginning of what we call Operation Sindoor, they did signal we know where you are. And the precision of some of these strikes. There's a 200-acre compound in the heart of a congested city in Muridke in Pakistan, and the Jaish-e-Mohammed compound in Bahawalpur, where our chaps were able to hit not just the compound, but a specific building within the compound known to host their headquarters. And that sort of precision must have been a bit of a shock to Pakistan. I have no doubt they'll rebuild these buildings again. I mean, how much damage can you do that can't be rebuilt in 6, 7, 9 months? But the message, nonetheless, we hope has been conveyed. The third question was on Pakistan, India, the Chinese factor. I think we've got to be very honest about this. There is undoubtedly a China factor. There is, first of all, the undoubted fact that China has a very big stake in Pakistan, bigger than it used to have. And that's because the single largest project in their Belt and Road Initiative worldwide is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that runs through territory we still claim Pakistani-occupied Kashmir, all the way down to Gwadar and Baluchistan, the port of the southwest part of Pakistan. And if you realize that in the old days, goods destined for Western China had to come from the Suez Canal and the Straits of Hormuz all the way past India, around India, into the Straits of Malacca, through into the South China Sea, unload in Southeast China in Guangzhou or Shenzhen, and then go by road across the whole mainland of China to get to Western China. They are now able to save 95% of the time and 90% of the cost by simply unloading in Gwadar without doing any of this and just going up the highway into Western China directly. So China, in its own national interest, as it were, has a major stake in Pakistan. Secondly, the Pakistanis have now become far more dependent on China than they used to be. They used to balance their military dependence on both America and China. Now it's 81% of their defense equipment is Chinese. So they are significantly linked to each other, and there's no doubt our own military has announced that we were facing an integrated attack by Chinese equipment and techniques and Pakistani users, as it were. And so there was what's called the Chinese kill chain, which links radar and planes and missiles and trigger mechanisms all in one seamless web, and they can therefore strike with great speed the moment they see an Indian target and so on. And this I think became very evident during these 88 hours. The fact is, our people were able to deal with it, and despite this, to penetrate these defenses and hit the 11 air bases that they did. So we came out of it all right, but we are now facing a new reality on the subcontinent. On top of that, we have our own bilateral problems with China. They have been, after many, many years of tranquility and growing trade cooperation, we've seen some belligerence since President Xi came to power. When he was visiting India in 2015, one of Mr. Modi's first visits, 14 or 15, he was actually visiting Mr. Modi in Ahmedabad when the PLA marched into territory that both armies used to patrol and stayed put, creating a crisis that rather affected the success of that visit. Subsequently, there was the Doklam incident in 2017 when the Chinese started building a road to a place that was completely uninhabitable, where not a blade of grass grows, so no shepherds needed to graze there or anything. The only possible purpose of encroaching on what we consider to be Bhutanese territory, to park a Chinese presence on Doklam, is that this peninsula, this plateau, overlooks the highway that links, the narrow highway that links India, most of mainland India, to the 7 northeastern states across Bangladesh, the narrow chicken's neck as it's called. And so the only logical reason is to be in a position to interdict that highway in the event of future military hostilities. Well, we hadn't planned on future military hostilities, but clearly some people in Beijing are. That's why they did this. The third episode was the nastiest of all, was in May 2020, late May, early June, when they again encroached on the disputed frontier with India, again on territory that both sides used to patrol, parked themselves and started establishing durable structures. Our soldiers went, so what you're doing is supposed to have withdrawn and our turn to patrol here now. And these fellows were killed. 20 Indian soldiers and officers were killed in the brawl that ensued. And that led to a major freeze of the relations between India and China for about 4.5 years, which had just begun to thaw after the 2 foreign ministers and the 2 national security advisors and 2 sets of generals met from September and October of last year, and they were able to resume joint patrolling and once again come to modus vivendi. But that now has faced a further setback with what happened during Operation Sindoor. So I don't know the answer as to what the immediate future prospects of the triangular relationship are, but I think many in India are conscious that the Pakistan-China nexus is and represents for us a very serious factor on now both our borders, presumably at the same time. So it's a matter of some concern, as you can imagine, for a peace-loving nation that has no desire to disturb the status quo, but finds 2 neighbors that would like to disturb the status quo.